Live from Citizen TV, this is Tonight with Sam Gituku.
Hello there, thank you so much for choosing Citizen TV on this 21st day of May 2026. Just in time for tonight. And tonight on Data Point, we're reflecting on the budget estimates of 2026-2027. We'll be looking at some of those figures. Already you may know that the total budget is expected to be 4.8 trillion shillings, which is the total size of expenditure that the National Treasury is proposing. But in that, we're also talking about how much has grown, because some of the sectors have actually grown by several billions of shillings. In the national security sector, we're talking about an allocation of 566 billion shillings. I'll be telling you, we're moving from what to what. And at the same time, if you're to look at the defense allocations, this is a number that has grown for the last 4 years by up to 111 billion shillings. Imagine that. In 2022-23, the allocation for defense was 139 billion shillings, but now it is standing at 250 billion shillings. That's what I'll be explaining later on. But also tonight, Data Point after it, we'll be talking to Ndindi Nyoro, who is the Member of Parliament for Kiharu. He'll be here to talk to us about what we're witnessing in the fuel sector. He has proposed that Parliament should amend the law to reduce the road maintenance levy by 7 shillings, and at the same time to scrap the VAT on fuel. And to have that conversation, we'll be speaking to him to understand what exactly does he want to do with that, and how does it affect the expenditure that is in the current budget and of course future budgets. And for that, we are paving way for Ndindi Nyoro. That's why we not have the news gang tonight as you focus on that. But first, here are the top stories tonight.
Due to the high fuel prices, now we find that from Nairobi to Kampala, they've added, now it's 4,000.
Agony on to commuters. Transport operators hike fares despite government concessions. Fuel price crisis. President Ruto leads high-stake talks with transport operators in Mombasa as the 7-day ultimatum nears. Tax backlash. Industry players cry foul over pay-as-you-earn and mobile money transaction stocks in finance bill proposals.
We have too many problems. The issue of the fuel,
yes,
the cost of living, transport costs, prices of consumer products.
Out of control. Former Deputy President Gachagua accuses President Ruto of rampant corruption in government. Our sign language interpreter is Njoki Shege, and tonight we begin with the story that talks are currently underway in the coastal city of Mombasa, where President William Ruto has convened a high-stake meeting of transport sector stakeholders to avert another shutdown of public transport. Transport operators staged a nationwide boycott on Monday and Tuesday this week, paralyzing transport across the country. The transport sector operators are demanding a total reversal of recent hike on fuel prices announced by the government last week. The paralysis of public transport also saw several Kenyans dying in protest across a number of towns in the country. President Ruto, who was out of the country on an official tour of Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, arrived in the country today and convened the stakeholders meeting. We shall update you on the progress of those talks currently taking place at State House, Mombasa. At the same time, commuters across the country are feeling the pinch after transport fares surged, despite assurances from Matatu stakeholders that prices would remain stable during the ongoing negotiations. Spot checks at bus terminal in Nairobi show fares have risen by up to 50% following earlier pronouncements by transport operators. At the same time, Anglican Church of Kenya Archbishop Jackson Ole Sapit has called on the government to address the fuel prices concerns as they are driving up the cost of living, straining households and the economy. Ben Kirui reports.
It was a collective sigh of relief across the country after stakeholders in the Matatu sector reached an agreement with the government to suspend their planned nationwide strike for 1 week, paving the way for fresh negotiations aimed at breaking the stalemate. Under the temporary truce, matatu operators were urged to maintain current fare levels and refrain from transferring any additional cost to commuters, as officials from the transport sector and the Matatu Owners Association continue efforts to resolve the contentious issues at the center of the dispute, but away from the negotiation rooms at the Transport Ministry's Transcom House headquarters, a different reality is playing out on the ground. Spot checks at several bus terminali reveal frustrated passengers still grappling with abrupt fare increases, despite assurances that prices will remain unchanged.
We don't see how your strike will yield any fruit because bei imebaki the same.
Fare imeongezeka after price hike. Sasa hii yenye tulikuwa tunalipa 100, tunalipa 150 jioni. Na ile strike yenye imekuwa haijasaidia.
Long distance travelers appear to have been hit the hardest. Bus fares from Nairobi to Mombasa have surged to more than 2,000 Kenya shillings, while passengers traveling to neighboring countries are parting with as much as 7,000 Kenya shillings for a single trip.
To travel from Nairobi to Kampala used to be 3,500 shillings, but due to the high fuel prices now, we find that from Nairobi to Kampala they've added now it's 4,000, and before from Nairobi to Dar es Salaam it used to be 4,000. But now it's 4,500.
The dispute that triggered the nationwide strike was sparked by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority's EPRA decision to increase the diesel prices by nearly 46 Kenya shillings per litre. In response, players in the Matatu sector pushed for fare hikes of up to 50%, warning of a total shutdown of transport services if their concerns were not addressed.
We have not agreed so that we carry this conversation forward. And you did state that we may have tomorrow Tuesday, we may have tomorrow Wednesday. Are we clear, members?
Yes. Following hours of high-level negotiations involving Transport Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen and Energy Cabinet Secretary Opiyo Wandayi, Matatu operators agreed to suspend the strike for a week to allow dialogue to continue.
The strike has been suspended. That is what I want our Kenyan citizen to hear.
Even so, both sides remain locked in consultations as efforts intensify to find a lasting solution, with Matatu stakeholders now gathered in Mombasa for further talks. This comes as Archbishop of the Anglican Church of Kenya, Reverend Dr. Jackson Olsapit, urging the government to take urgent measures to stabilize fuel prices, noting that the situation is affecting economic stability and daily livelihoods across the country.
The governments must do something to reduce the cost of fuel, because fuel will increase the prices of every other commodity in the supermarket and services across the country.
Ben Kirui, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
And now to the ongoing public hearings on the Finance Bill 2026, stakeholders are taking issue with the government for failing to review tax bans for pay-as-you-earn and for introducing new taxes on mobile money transactions. Appearing before the National Assembly's Finance and Planning Committee, the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, ISPAC, and the Kenya Bankers Association say more taxes are hampering the ability of service industry to create new jobs. Jimmy Mbogo reports.
Direct that and substitute therefore the words at.
The first day of submissions took off as expected, with stakeholders from organized groups taking the opportunity to make their proposals to the committee. Top of the agenda, a call for a review of the current pay-as-you-earn bracket. In the presentations made by both the Kenya Bankers Association and the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, the groups told the committee that a reduction in the marginal rate of pay-as-you-earn and the expansion of pay bands will enhance progressive tax collection in line with the government's policy objectives.
By reducing that tax rate to 30%, for example, the higher tax brackets, you're going to unlock into the economy about 28.1 billion. Actually, the computation shows 28.1 billion shillings released back into the economy. Once that is released into the economy, it means that we can create at least 36,000 new jobs.
So the assurance is that the 28 billion will be offset within the first year. And what this will be able to result to is the fact that the second and subsequent years, we will be able to generate much higher taxes more than the 31 billion that will be generated in the first year.
You could pay at least...
The bankers further arguing that a 5% pay reduction across all bands will help increase production in the country while expanding the GDP to 42 billion shillings. According to KBA, every 1 billion shillings released to the economy generates at least 1,300 new jobs.
Any 1 shilling increase, it enables employees to be able to access between 10 to 20 shillings in loans. So picking that number, that 50% of the employees will be able to access loans with the increased disposable income, that comes to 14 billion. The 14 billion will be able to unlock loans within our ecosystem to the sum of 140 billion.
But besides the pay issues, the finance bill in clause 31 further proposes to change VAT status from zero rated to exempt for inputs on raw materials locally purchased or imported, an issue that experts warn will see the manufacture of animal feeds become expensive.
What are we doing to our food security situation in this country? Are we saying that it is better for people to import the eggs from Uganda, for example, because it's cheaper to manufacture there? Because this, if I manufacture these animal feeds, I will not be able to claim the input VAT. I will not be able to claim the input VAT on transport because of the supplies that I'm making. So we think that there's a sense in retaining this provision in order to continue subsidizing production.
The stakeholders also raised concerns over the proposal to introduce withholding taxes on card services, terming this retrogressive and inefficient. They argue that fees involved is purely transactional and facilitation fees and cannot be considered as royalties.
So let's not burden transactions or technology or innovation with taxes because that really is not good for economy, is not good for financial inclusion.
The provisions in the Finance Bill of 2026 seeking to empower the Kenya Revenue Authority to make use of third-party information continues to raise an eyebrow for different stakeholders. The stakeholders warning that this will lead to a lot of litigation that can be avoided. It is because of this that different stakeholders are now calling on the Finance Committee of the National Assembly to intervene and make proper descriptions of what third-party information can be used or delete the entire clause. Jimmy Mbogo, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
And related to that, Civil Society Coalition Okoa Uchumi has raised concerns over the Finance Bill 2026, terming it punitive. The group is calling on Kenyans to reject the bill, citing impositions such as the increase on mobile phone transactions taxes. They have also opposed granting the Kenya Revenue Authority power to access citizens' personal data without consent. And as Willie Lusige now reports, Okoa Uchumi Group are warning of legal action and protests if their concerns are not addressed.
The measures contained in the 2026 Finance Bill to finance the Kenyan shillings 4.8 trillion budget continue to spark sharp debate across the country.
The team gathered here.
Okoa Uchumi has joined in opposing the bill, arguing that the bill will significantly increase the tax burden on already overtaxed citizens.
Domestic borrowing is projected to raise a whopping 900 billion. This begs the question, when will we cut our cloth according to our size? Why are we living beyond our means?
The group also opposes the proposal to raise excise duty on mobile phones from 10% to 25%, saying it will undermine digital access.
Consider retaining the current rate or adopting a modest increase not exceeding 12.5%, as the proposed rate will significantly increase the cost of smartphones. The proposal contradicts the government's digital inclusion agenda and the principle of leaving no one behind.
They further reject provisions allowing KRA to access citizens' private data.
While the common mwananchi is subjected to invasive surveillance, aggressive enforcement and punitive compliance measures, the politically connected and economically powerful are shielded through legislative protection. The result is a tax regime that promotes inequality, protects elite interests.
They say they will not remain silent and will instead take legal action and lead protests should parliament fail to make changes.
Malalamishi yetu tutaipeleka rasmi kwa bunge, haswa ile kamati ya finance, pia kwa kamati ya bajeti. Kama hawatatusikiza, yale ambayo yatakuwa yametutatiza sana, tutaenda mahakamani. Mwishowe, wasipotusikiza, tutafanya kongamano ya bunge ya wananchi.
The Federation of Kenya Employers FKE has also announced it will file its objection on Monday, saying workers are already overtaxed.
The government to see what can be done to alleviate the high level of statutory deductions on employees' payrolls, because that also puts pressure on businesses. In terms of KRA, we also want a situation where there is no increase in the taxation and access to data and issues like that.
Willie Lusige, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
At the same time, Democracy for Citizens Party leader Rigathi Gachagua now says the country is headed towards economic turmoil, which he attributes to what he describes as bad governance and widespread corruption. The former deputy president, speaking during an interview in the United Kingdom, accused President William Ruto of amassing wealth at the expense of national development. He further called on Kenyans in the diaspora to actively participate in what he termed a push for regime change in the 2027 general election.
With the DCP leader wrapping up his week-long tour of the United Kingdom, Rigathi Gachagua is now warning that the country's economy is on the brink of collapse, blaming what he describes as deep-rooted corruption.
The situation we are in, the president came to look for wealth. In the process, he has destroyed the country. He's very wealthy, of course, undoubtedly. Yes. You know, I remember, and I must tell the people of Kenya, when we were in good books, initially he told me that he wants in 5 years to be richer than the family of Kenyatta and Moi combined. It looked a tall order to me.
The former deputy president alleges that there is a renewed and deliberate pattern of wealth accumulation through graft within President William Ruto's administration.
William Ruto is richer than the family of Kenyatta and the family of Moi combined after only 4 years in government. But in the process, he's destroyed the country because Kenyans are saying we have too many problems. The issue of the fuel,
yes,
you know, the cost of living, you know, transport costs, prices of consumer products.
Gachagua has termed the recently concluded Africa-France Forward Summit an alleged personalized business deal between President William Ruto and French President Emmanuel Macron.
Now Summit Road. They discussed on how to get some money out of the whole thing, cancel the contract, and pay the French companies 7.1 billion shillings.
In vowing not to consider any pre- and post-election handshake with his former boss, President Ruto, Gachagua says such a move will be a betrayal for Kenyans.
Asking me to have a handshake with William Ruto will just even make him worse. You see, right now we are checking him, and he's not liking it. To tell you the truth.
With the next general election fast approaching, the DCP party leader has announced that the united opposition will rely on both popularity and a scientific approach in selecting its presidential flag bearer and deputy.
You must add what you control, plus what somebody else can control, put it together to get 50+1. So the decision of my running mates will be informed by science.
The former deputy president is expected back in the country this weekend after concluding his week-long tour of the United Kingdom. Seth Olale, Citizen TV.
And back in the country, President William Ruto has kicked off a land liberation drive at the coast, issuing over 33,000 title deeds to thousands of families who have lived as squatters for decades. The president has also pledged to resettle an additional 200,000 people across Mombasa, Kilifi, Tana River, Taita Taveta, Kwale and Lamu counties. Ruto declared that his administration will not allow absentee landlords to continue denying coastal communities their birthright to land. Stephen Leto has more.
The coastal land question has long been a political hot potato. A decades-long crisis that has haunted successive governments and left thousands of families trapped as squatters on land they call home. Today, President Ruto stepped into the storm, promising to end the grip of absentee landlords at the coast. In a high-stakes event held at the Mamangina waterfront, the president issued 33,025 title deeds to residents across Mombasa, Kwale, Kilifi, Taita Taveta, Tana River and Lamu counties, a move the government says is meant to restore land ownership dignity to thousands of coastal families.
Leo hapa tunatoa title deeds 33,000 kwa wananchi wa sehemu mbalimbali. As we sort out settlement issues, we must address ourselves to the question of absentee landlords.
President Ruto says the move is aimed at delivering long overdue justice to thousands of families who have spent generations without legal ownership of land they occupy. The government says it held extensive engagements with absentee landlords before moving to restore the title deeds crisis that has for years fueled tension and uncertainty at the coast.
Nishukuru viongozi wa pwani ambao wameshughulikia, wamesaidia rais katika kuongoza mazungumzo na wale absentee landlords ambao walikuwa na title deeds, hati miliki, lakini wananchi walikuwa naishi katika mashamba bila hizo title deeds.
Ndani ya siku 90 mimi narudi hapa kutoa hati miliki 200,000 ya hawa wananchi.
Sasa kama rais ameweka mpango wa kusettle mambo ya absentee landlord katika jimbo la Pwani, katika jimbo la wapi? Pwani. Anafaa fai.
Tumpongeze Mheshimiwa Rais kwa makofi. President Ruto, while touring Kinango in Kwale for a rural electrification project, hit out at opposition leaders over alleged incitement. He said the case for Rachel Wandeto was a serious indictment to the opposition leaders, inciting the public against each other.
Mwenye mnawaita Wakenya wengine wasaliti, mpaka mama Rachel Wandeto ameuawa kwa sababu ya chuki yenu, kwa sababu ya ukabila yenu, kwa sababu ya profiling ambayo mmefanya Wakenya wengine eti ni wasaliti. Siku moja mutajibu.
Ruto also defended the broad-based government arrangement, saying it is aimed at promoting unity and stability at the country.
Vile tulikubaliana na Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga, tukasema tunatengeneza serikali ya broad-based, serikali ya kuunganisha Wakenya wote, serikali ya kuondoa ubaguzi.
Despite our colors being yellow and orange, we have united to come up with a solution for our people.
Usirudi nyuma, usimame hivyo, na sisi tukishikana na wewe na tuende mdogo mdogo, hatua kwa hatua kwa mpango.
Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
The High Court on Thursday found that it cannot grant stay of execution orders for former Cabinet Secretary Raphael Tuju's Dari Business Park in Karen, as the property has already been sold. It has, however, granted the orders in respect to Tuju's Entim Sidai Wellness Sanctuary, pending hearing and determination by the Court of Appeal that in a matter that was filed within 60 days. Tuju is required to deposit a sum of 50 million shillings as security within 30 days.
An application by former Cabinet Secretary Raphael Tuju to stay a ruling delivered on the 9th of March, effectively clearing the path for the disposal of 2 of his properties in Karen over a contested 2 billion shilling debt owed to the East African Development Bank, has partially succeeded. High Court Judge Moses Otieno granting temporary stay of execution in respect to one of the properties, Entim Sidai Wellness Sanctuary in Karen. The same, however, does not apply to the second of the properties in dispute, Dari Business Park. Justice Otieno finding that stay orders cannot apply as the property has already been disposed of as security for the bank loan, stating, and I quote, "The evidence before this court, however, demonstrates that one of the properties, Tamarind Karen and Dari Business Park, was sold at a public auction, transferred to the 10th defendant and possession taken. In respect of that property, the applicant's equity of redemption was extinguished upon the fall of the hammer. The ruling continuing to read, the law is clear that once such a sale has taken place, the remedy available to an aggrieved chargee lies in damages pursuant to Section 99 of the Land Act. This position has been affirmed by the authorities such as Simon Njoroge, where the court held that a completed sale cannot be undone through injunctive relief and any loss is compensable. Tuju, however, has leave to appeal the ruling delivered on 9th of March that struck out his amended plaint dated 25th of April 2025. Lady Justice Josephine Wayua Wambua Mungare in that ruling finding that in summary, the plaintiffs are essentially asking the court to rehear an injunction already denied, reopen a debt already adjudicated internationally and recognized domestically, and relitigate the enforceability of security over properties already subject to multiple court orders. I find, she stated, that the bank's position and objection is well founded, that this application is a blatant abuse of court process meant to frustrate its lawful recovery efforts after years of default and litigation. There is no way that the plaintiff's amended plaint dated 25th April 2025 survives, and the same is accordingly struck out. In respect of Tuju's partially successful application of stay, pending a challenge in the Court of Appeal, Tuju is required to within 30 days deposit security in the sum of 50 million shillings in an interest-earning joint account in the names of counsel for the parties, failing which the stay order shall automatically lapse. The court holding that the security serves, among other purposes, to ensure the right of appeal is not abused as a mechanism for delay. Olive Burrows, Citizen TV.
Staying at the courts, the High Court has issued a landmark ruling stopping the blanket criminalization of consensual sexual encounters between adolescents. This follows a petition that was filed by a group of rights advocates challenging sections of the Sexual Offences Act which criminalizes all sexual conduct involving persons under 18 years without any distinction between exploitative abuse and mutually consensual, non-coercive peer relationships between adolescents. Safina Chengoma has that story.
The petition by Center for Reproductive Rights and Reproductive Health Network Kenya, filed in August 2025 on behalf of 3 adolescents and the Network for Adolescent and Youth of Africa, was prompted by charges of defilement against a 17-year-old boy after police raided a room he shared with his 16-year-old girlfriend in February 2025. The petition was also premised on another case involving another 17-year-old who faced prosecution due to a pregnancy in a peer relationship before charges were later withdrawn.
Historically, Kenya has documented our prisons beaming with many young people who are in prison simply because they engaged in peer relations as either boyfriend, girlfriend, and both of them finding themselves as being below the age of 18. The Sexual Offences Act blanketly proscribes that relationship as a relationship that involves a defilement.
The petitioners challenged Section 8, 9, 11 and 43 of the Sexual Offences Act, which according to the petitioners criminalizes all sexual conduct involving persons under 18 years without any distinction between exploitative abuse and mutually consensual, non-coercive, non-exploitative peer relationships between adolescents.
It is only those acts that are coercive, that are exploitative, that must then be subjected to the criminal justice process.
Justice Bahati Mwamuye ruled in favor of the petitioners, declaring that applying criminal sanctions where there is no evidence of exploitation, coercion, abuse or power imbalance between adolescents of close age proximity is inconsistent with other rights of children protected in the Constitution.
When you're criminalizing or you're prosecuting an adolescent, there are certain factors that come into play: the disruption of the education, the stigmatization of that child, the expose to the detention, and then the criminal record that comes with it.
Senior Counsel Yambo advocates for extra caution in the implementation of the judgment to avoid opening a Pandora's box.
The court is not legalizing adolescent sex. It is just requiring the justice system to distinguish between the exploitation and consensual peer conduct. So the challenge is how they are going to implement, because if we don't have clear guidelines, discretion can easily become an inconsistency in terms of how we protect the children.
The judgment also raises fundamental questions over the validity of sexual consent among minors.
A child cannot give legal consent to sexual activity. That cannot happen. So when two minors are involved, the justice system, what this judgment says, must carefully balance the child protection, the safeguarding of the child, and context where the child or the children are not subjected to harmful criminal processes.
While delivering his judgment, Justice Bahati Mwamuye ordered the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions to formalize, publish and gazette prosecutorial guidelines on handling of consensual adolescent peer relationship cases. The National Police Service was also directed to review and align its arrest and investigative procedures in sexual offences involving minors with the constitutional principles outlined in the judgment. The court further ordered policy reforms that guarantee adolescents access to sexual and reproductive health information and services. Safina Chingoma, Citizen TV.
To matters crime, homicide detectives probing the murder of gospel musician Rachel Wandeto have been granted 10 more days to hold a suspect linked to the murder for longer in order to complete investigations. The suspect, a taxi driver identified as Josiah Njeri, was arrested within Ruai in Nairobi. Police say Njeri was the last person in communication with the deceased. Investigators placed him within the musician's residential area moments before she was attacked by assailants and doused with petrol. Detectives believe the suspect holds crucial information that could lead to a breakthrough even as they hunt for more accomplices. Makadara Law Court's Magistrate James Juma Maya ordered the suspect to be detained at the Kilimani police station. The matter will come up for mention on the 3rd of June.
To conduct forensic analysis of the response DNA samples and to retrieve cameras, CCTV cameras, and identify more evidence or witnesses in the case. However, I do find that the 21 days requested by the applicants are too many for such investigations. I order that the respondent be detained for 10 days at Kilimani police station.
All right, so now we are taking a short break, but remember we have a conversation with the Member of Parliament for Kiharu Nyoro, what he knows about the fuel prices in the country, what he's proposing to do, but at the same time matters of economy. But first, data point, here is what's coming up.
Coming up on Data Point, inside the 2026 budget estimates, as allocation for defense grows by more than 110 billion shillings in 4 years, to hit 250 billion shillings.
All right, welcome back. You're just in time for Data Point, and shortly we'll be speaking to the Member of Parliament for Kiharu Nyoro, who is already here in studio. But first, let's take a look at the numbers. We are talking about the budget estimates for 2026-2027. Already we have a figure of 4.8 trillion shillings as the total expenditure, but when you look at the revenue side, the government is hoping to collect up to 2.9 trillion shillings of ordinary revenue. There are appropriations in aid, which are fee for service that government departments offer from time to time at different levels. That will bring about 644 billion shillings. For grants, the government is hoping to get up to 43.6 billion shillings. And of course, the balance is the deficit of 1.1 trillion shillings, which the plan is to borrow it largely from the domestic market up to about 995 billion shillings, and the balance of 116 billion shillings from the external market. Let's take a look at the budget estimates and how they've been growing over time. So the blue line will see see there is whether it's the original budget or the first budget or the budget estimates, and the red line is eventually what is the revised budget or the final budget based on the various supplementary budgets that come through Parliament. So you'll see that in 2022-2023, the financial year when President William Ruto came to the office, this is a budget that was passed in June 2022. It was 3.3 trillion shillings at the passage point in June, but by the time the year concluded, it had risen by more than 300 billion shillings to settle at 3.67 trillion shillings. The year that followed, the initial budget was 3.67 trillion shillings, but by the end of the year, it grew by more than 700 billion shillings to settle at 4.43 trillion shillings. Come to 2024-2025, the budget that was passed in June 2024 was 3.9 trillion shillings. Remember, this is the year the Gen Z uprising against the finance bill of that year. The budget was initially 3.9, but ended up at 4.37 trillion shillings, despite the promise to cut budgets. Then come 2025-2026, the current financial year. At the point of passage in June last year, it was about 4.3 trillion shillings, but as we speak, based on supplementary budget one, it is at 4.69 trillion shillings and likely to go higher or to change based on the changes that are being witnessed in the country in this last quarter. Now, at the moment, the budget estimates for the financial year 26-27 is 4.8 trillion shillings. Based on previous history of the final budget going higher than that, there's a possibility it may go up to a figure we do not know yet until that happens. But let's take a look at what's more in regards to the expenditure based on national security allocations. In the current financial year, this is 25-2026, the total allocation to national security is 465 billion shillings. But the estimates, according to the National Treasury, so far for the coming financial year, it is 566 billion shillings, which is a difference of 101 billion shillings. I'll be explaining a bit of that difference because at the Department, or at the Ministry of Defense rather, the current year, we have 200 billion shillings allocated. But this is being proposed to rise by another 50 billion shillings to settle at 250 billion shillings. Why? We'll look for answers. The National Police Service, the allocation for the current financial year was 123.8 billion shillings at the point of estimates. But as we speak, the estimates for the coming year, which starts in July, is 144 billion shillings. You see that's a difference of 20 billion shillings plus. For prisons, they have been allocated 34.9 billion shillings for the current financial year. But the proposal for the year starting July is 42.7 billion shillings, another increment of 7.8 billion shillings. And then the Internal Security Department, 35.8 billion shillings for the current year, but it's proposed to rise by 10 billion shillings, almost 10 billion shillings, to settle at 45 billion shillings for the financial year beginning July. Let's take a look at more details when it comes to specifics in the Ministry of Defense. And I want you to pay attention to this because in 2022-2023, when President William Ruto came to the office, the budget for defense was 139 billion shillings. This has grown over time, and the estimates for the coming year is 250 billion shillings. That's a difference of more than 110 billion shillings. Why? Because if you look at the trajectory, it has been rising consistently. 139 in 2022, 153 billion shillings in 2023, rising to 179, 202 for the year that we are in, and of course headed to 250 billion shillings. That may change based on supplementary budgets that may come over time. Let's take a look at the allocation for the National Intelligence Service. It has also been changing from time to time, from 37.6 billion shillings in 2022 to now the proposal is 58.6 billion shillings. So you'll see that there's been a bit of rising, then a little slump there, but then going back to 58.6. And it's important to know that most of these allocations are recurrent expenditure, not much of capital expenditure, what you like to call development expenditure. Let's take a look at what else has evolved over time. So the reasons that the Control of Budget gave in the financial year 2024-2025, why the increment, especially in the Defense and National Intelligence Service funding, is that there are requirements for military modernization, enhanced territorial defense capabilities, and strengthened intelligence gathering operations. This is what has been the official reasoning that has been given. Now, the other one that we want to look at is what else is growing over time. So the current financial year, the education sector has been allocated 702 billion shillings, but in the budget estimates, the figure we've been able to see is 668 billion shillings for 2026-2027. The Teacher Service Commission, an allocation from 387 billion shillings, going up by 20 billion shillings to settle at 407.8 billion. For free day secondary, almost at the same level because it is 54.8 billion. The estimates proposed for July, the financial year beginning July, is 54.6 billion shillings. For junior secondary, again, is standing at the same level of 30.9 billion shillings. Free primary education, almost the same because it is 7.9 billion shillings for current year. The coming year, 7 billion. And for higher education loans board from 41 billion shillings to 56.7 billion shillings. And as you look at that, there's of course, more conversation that will be held. If you to look at the health sector, there's a growth from 132 billion shillings in the current year, growing to 170 billion shillings. That's a growth of about 38 billion shillings. Primary healthcare fund, an allocation from 13 billion shillings on the day of estimates last year, or the day of budget last year, to now rise to 19.1 billion shillings. The emergency, critical and chronic illnesses fund was allocated 10 billion shillings in June last year. The proposed estimate is 4 billion shillings. That's a reduction of about 6 billion shillings. And the questions should be asked about why. So that's how Data Point looks like this week. Right, and as we get to digest that, let me begin with you, Mheshimiwa Dinyoro. Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Sam. Good evening.
Right, as a former chairperson of the Budget Committee, there are some few trends and patterns that we're witnessing, and I want to begin with that of the allocation to the Defense Department. Because you've been there, what is informing this that now we have grown by over 100 billion shillings in just 4 years?
Sam, first, thank you very much for having me this evening. It's actually my first time, I think, to come on Thursday.
Yeah.
There has been rise in security sector.
Yeah.
You allow me to be specific.
Yeah.
Based on the knowledge I have and the experience.
Right.
We have security organs that are very respected in Kenya. Respected to a level where talking about them on TV may not be such a polite thing in terms of the kind of respect Kenyans have on these institutions. Mm. But as you know, politicians, and especially when recklessness checks in, they may be tempted to actually use the most respected organs to do things that are not respectable. And I say so because I remember in the year 2024, when I was still the chairman of budget, and the head of state gave a press conference after the protests, and he committed that in Kenya we will no longer have something called confidential fund. Confidential fund, as you know, it's handicapped in terms of the kind of audit you can do on them. Maybe that's an area we need to look at. We need to zoom in, and especially in those two budgets, because as you look, as you have highlighted there,
right,
we have one department cobbling up over 100 billion Kenya shillings in terms of rice. Mm-hmm. And what you need to look at, number one, is what kind of machinery has been bought. Number two, you look at, has there been massive recruitment? Because those are the only areas that may gobble up so much budget. But if you see a lot of O&M budget, O&M means operations and management, in an institution that has no kind of things that I've described, then there is a likelihood we could be having a bloated confidential budget, which necessarily gets used by politicians, because, and especially not just politicians, but politicians with very much power, with a lot of power. So that if Kenyans, for example, complain that the State House is having so much budget, then you become creative on how you can still spend money within State House, but it is domiciled elsewhere.
What are you saying?
What I've said.
I'm asking you this question because you were there 2022, 2023. You may not have been the chair of the budget, but you became soon after the Kenya Kwanza administration came to office. But in 2023, 24, 25, you were there as the chairperson of the budget committee.
Precisely.
And there's increment in those years of about 20 billion shillings every other year.
Yeah.
So why did you increase it?
You have highlighted very well in terms of the increment and the years.
Yeah.
You need to look at where you have what you'd call an organic increment and where there is a rapid increment. To the best of my knowledge that time, there was some recruitment in some of the security agencies. That is the reason why we had to account for that. There was also a program back then which I think was a collaboration between our government, if I remember well, it was Turkey or some other country. There was also some allocation in that regard.
Right.
But I'm also telling you that I cannot rule out the fact that security organs are usually the best way to put in political money.
And at the same time, perhaps you may know, because for the last, I think about 2 years or so, you've seen the Minister of Defense getting involved in construction of different infrastructure, call them stadia, whether it's in Kitui, whether it is Wajir, the venue for Madaraka Day celebrations this year. There has been interventions, I think in Vihiga, there's an instruction from the President to build a stadium for 900 million shillings. Where is this domiciled, these budgets?
It's usually domiciled in the original ministry. The role that is usually played back then, the role that is played by DOD is basically the role of supervision and technical support. But in terms of the financials, they are most of the times domiciled in the original ministries. Yeah.
And then, because now you've spoken about the Ministry of Defense and now to National Police Service rising to about 144 billion shillings proposed, the justification over time?
I've told you, if you look at the graph which you highlighted there, you'll see that the biggest increment is for the last 1 year, especially if you exempt the one for intelligence gathering, which in 2024 had quite a high budget. I want to repeat again, and I am not saying that because I was and I am not. I am saying so because it's a reality that we need to live with as Kenyans. That we have respected security organs in the country. And they are respected because they have been known to be straitjacket in the way they operate. I just want to say this broadly. It is not good that us as politicians, and especially the most powerful, that we can probably, maybe, put in so much confidential facts in these very respected security organs, which then we end up spending this money on political front, other than in the real security of Kenyans. So I'm saying that to you, Sam, knowing you are intelligent, you can do your homework without necessarily pinpointing specifics.
Does Parliament get to know this, whether it's at the plenary or departmental committees or the Budget and Appropriations Committee? Do they know that?
To know what?
That whatever you're allocating is money that could possibly be used for other reasons.
Some of these, and I don't want to go to specific ones because I don't want to be sensational. Some of these organizations, they operate on something called one-line budget. One-line budget means we allocate money, and when you allocate this money, then it is upon the agency to know how to spend it. They ask for money, internally they know the specifics, but the argument is usually that you cannot then come and describe how you need to spend this money in terms of programs. Because the argument is usually that the other party whom you are defending yourself from could get hold of this information and use it against you. However, my personal view, having served there, is that we give ourselves up to possible manipulation when it comes to that. And we have seen, because I compare, for example, Kenya and other developed countries, including the US, you can question anything about any security organ, even in the US in terms of spending.
Right.
And you'll get this data. So possibly so that we avoid any situation where the security organs may be misused, we need to be a bit more open. And I'm saying that because I have seen the reports of the Auditor General in the recent past. Also having a lot of vehement complaints on the same, that they don't have a lot of view in terms of specifics.
Right.
So that is the dilemma.
Okay. And of course, this is important because you're talking about if the allocation is to succeed, the proposal of 566 billion shillings, if I take 566 billion shillings subjected against a total of about 4.8, that is what percentage? Almost 20% of the entire expenditure plan.
That is worrying. At best.
Yes. So then, if you're to look at the growth in expenditure again, because there's a graph there that we show in 2022-2023 we were spending up to 3.3 trillion shillings in national budget. Of course, it was revised later to 3.7 trillion. But now the proposed estimates are 4.8 trillion shillings.
Yeah.
That's an increment of more than 1.5 trillion shillings. The justification?
I am happy we have departed from the other conversation.
Why? You don't want to give more details?
It's not my cup of tea to discuss security issues.
Okay.
I would rather leave them out of TV. So going to the broader issues now.
Yeah.
There are many reasons that there has been a growth path. One is that across the world and across history, the share of government expenditure in terms of GDP keeps on growing.
Yep.
Because, of course, the demands for the people keeps on growing. That's a general reason.
Yep.
The other one is that the budget of Kenya is not the one you have highlighted. The budget of Kenya is not the one that will be read in June. The budget of Kenya is also not the Appropriations Act that will be signed. The budget of Kenya is the money that gets released by the Exchequer. There is a huge difference between what we read and what we actualize. So never get worried about what you are reading in this particular period of time.
Right.
Always get more concerned about what you read at the closure of the financial year. What is more worrying, if you look at that trend, is that as we increase the expenditure, there has been a commensurate increase in deficit. And especially if you look now, we are talking about trillions of money.
Right.
So zoom in further and you realize that even as we enhance the broader expenditure, the development expenditure gets decimated. So you have a graph that is rising of the broader budget, but you have a graph that is declining of the development expenditure. So those are some of the things that we must face. First, in terms of, are we cutting our clothes according to our size? Is it sustainable? But more importantly, what we read, do we end up actually doing it?
You know, you said something very interesting, and you're right, because even the budgets that you're talking about here, they've like the ones for the previous financial years, they were amended on several occasions through supplementary budget. But you're also introducing the element of whatever the Exchequer releases are. Does Parliament get an opportunity to read the reports of the control of budget? And is there any intervention Parliament has proposed?
I may not speak for Parliament, I can speak for myself. Yes, I do, and sometimes, unfortunately, the reports of all the reports usually come after the train has left the station, and therefore you can only, most of the time, read them to inform the next season, the next budget cycle. However, there are two offices that I used to respect a lot, and I still respect them, back then when I was chair and now, which is the Office of the Auditor General. I mean, if you check even on the Hansard, I used to commend the kind of work they do. And of course, the controller of budget. Because at least them, they do figures, not based on any political persuasion or inclination. And I actually find them very objective. I also want you, in all the data that you actually reference, always also look out for the Parliamentary Budget Office. It's actually one of also the most competent organizations that I know.
Right.
But holistically, they voice the same things I have said. One is that our current expenditure is not sustainable. Secondly, our debt situation is in a cliff as we talk now. Just to paint a picture, I know maybe we'll get into that later. But let me just paint a picture. If you look at these corrections that you have highlighted, the government is anticipating to collect 2.9 trillion in the next financial year. But they were expecting to collect 2.6 trillion the current financial year. By the 10th month, we were at 1.97 trillion.
No. I thought by 9th month they reported 2 trillion shillings.
2 trillion is 1.97.
Okay. Go ahead.
So if you then input the other 2 months, we'll be lucky to get a 2.4 trillion or 2.5, mostly 2.4 trillion. We'll definitely have a shortfall of over 150 billion Kenya shillings. That's not even the point. The point is that if you look at the amount of money we'll be servicing debt at, you realize you're talking about 1.25 trillion Kenya shillings. I actually thought we had tried that time that we'd learn the hard lesson that you cannot continue digging a hole which you are in. That's what precisely we are doing.
All right.
That now, if you reference, for example, the month of February, 72% of collections went into the debt repayment, interest rate alone. But this is the point, Sam, that I want us to also have as I paint this picture. That in the year 2022, our debt was 8.7 trillion. Now we are talking about 13 trillion Kenya shillings, approximately. Kenya is borrowing 4 billion Kenya shillings every day on net basis. Net basis meaning I have discounted what is called refinancing. I have removed the money you borrow to pay the previous loan. The way you can have a loan at a bank and another one Shylock and another one at a SACCO. You can borrow the SACCO one to pay the Shylock one. That one I have not even included. I'm talking about net debt. That we have now borrowed over 4 trillion Kenya shillings in under 4 years. We must do something about that. Otherwise, we are actually facing and staring at a cliff.
We'll talk about more in regards to that. Of course, so much more, including the conversations, what he knows about fuel, and of course, the other things that he's proposing to make fuel cheaper, but that is later on. But first, Siaya Governor James Orengo now says his life is in danger following what he termed as the arbitrary withdrawal of his security detail by the government Wednesday evening. Orengo, who spoke to Citizen TV, said the Inspector General of Police should be held liable should anything happen to him. Orengo says 9 of his security officers in Nairobi and Siaya counties were recalled without explanation.
Goons have been attacking, political leaders. My friend and colleague Ososi was attacked in broad daylight. I went to a funeral service in Seme, and again, I was attacked by goons. Without a doubt, I'm worried about it. But I'm not intimidated, because if I worry about it, then I cannot do the political work that I'm supposed to do. Mboya was killed in broad daylight in the streets of Nairobi because his security detail was not with him. JM was abducted right in the middle of this town because he had no security with him. And days later, he was found dead somewhere in Ngong. If something like that happens to me, or if I'm attacked by goons like Ososi was attacked, I'll hold the IG responsible.
Kenya Power earns over 380 million shillings in revenue from the electric mobility sector during the last 34 months.
Skia, ni juicy. Flavor zote tamu tena fruity. Yummy na flow kama maji, juu ni tamu kama sali. Ni juicy. Are you bored? Kuna vitu zinakuudhi, usijali my bro, hebu kama taka juicy juni.
From the ones we hold close to heart. future, empowering women, fueling prosperity through networking, entrepreneurial training, and financial support. Start your Fanikisha journey with Equity today.
Kazi gani tena hii? Hebu kwanza tuhakikishe insurance yako ni halali. Wewe unachukua tu karatasi unabandika Unajua hii sasa ni police case wewe. Shuka. Ashike simu.
The customer you're trying to reach is not available.
Don't find yourself in such situations. Verify your insurance sticker before you drive. Dial *352# or download Bima Yangu app to verify. Usibahatishe. Thibitisha pap.
Deals kibao kila wiki na Carrefour.
Enjoy Guru Special Basmati Rice 5 kg at 1,099 shillings. Club Soda Assorted 2 liters at 124 shillings. Ranton's Washer 10 kg at 25,795 shillings. And Ranton's Fridge 196 liters at 41,995 shillings.
Deals kibao kila wiki na Carrefour.
The tiles are even wider, so you use less pieces.
Which saved us money.
Steal the show with versatile, Oriental and Elegantile steel roofing tiles. Backed by a genuine warranty only from Mabati Rolling Mills. Visit our dealership or call us today at 0788 202020.
Usitie shaka. Mwenyezi Mungu ndiye ngao yako kila upande. Kwake utapata fahari na ushindi. Mulilie tu kwa sauti na atakusikiza akiwa enzini. Kwa mapenzi yake utapata amani na neema yake itabaki nawe. Mwenyezi Mungu anakulinda kutokana na maovu yote yanayokuzingira. Baraka zake zinakuandama.
Dial *811 276# to get anakulinda.
Now, leaders from across Africa have gathered in Nairobi for the Africa Soft Power Summit with calls for the continent to convert its growing influence into real economic ownership and investment opportunities. The four-day summit has brought together players in business, finance, technology, media, and the creative industry to discuss Africa's economic future. This year's discussions are focusing on market access, investment, innovation, and how African-led enterprises can gain greater ownership and control within the global economy. Organizers say the summit aims to position Africa's cultural and creative influence as a driver of long-term economic growth.
African influence is not the question. The question is whether that influence will translate into enduring economic power. How do we build systems that allow African value to compound for Africans over time?
The outdated narrative of a continent defined by dependency, crisis, or vulnerability is steadily giving way to a far more accurate reality.
The Africa Soft Power Summit has therefore become an important space for shaping how Africa tells its story, builds influence, and creates opportunities through culture, creativity, innovation, and also partnerships.
The electric mobility industry is expanding rapidly, with more than 35,000 electric vehicles now estimated to be on the country's roads. But as adoption grows, pressure is mounting on the country's electricity infrastructure to provide stable and affordable power needed to support the transition. Jasmine Omboy has more.
Electric vehicles are becoming more common on Kenyan roads, particularly in Nairobi, which accounts for the largest share of EV adoption. Kenya Power says electricity sales to the e-mobility sector generated 382 million shillings between July 2023 and April this year as electricity consumption linked to EV charging continued to rise. Monthly revenue from EV charging increased from under 1 million shillings in July 2023 to more than 35 million shillings in February this year.
At the time, we had 1,200 vehicles on the road in 2023. Now we have more than 35 registered vehicles on the road in 2020, end of 2025, 35,000.
Most of the growth has come from motorcycles and three-wheelers, but demand is increasingly shifting towards larger commercial vehicles that consume more electricity. Speaking during an electric vehicle parade organized by Kenya Power and GIZ ahead of the 2026 e-mobility conference, Kenya Power Managing Director Joseph Siror says the country requires additional generation capacity to meet rising demand.
I can confirm that there are many instances we've had to load share the country when the wind generation is low. And the reason being, when it is not there, then when you sum up all the other generations, it cannot supply the demand at peak.
The government plans to develop a 1.2 gigawatt gas-fired power plant in Mombasa to help stabilize electricity supply. Kenya is also expected to increase electricity imports from Ethiopia beyond the current 200 megawatts from January next year. Kenya Power says more investment will also be needed in transmission infrastructure to support rising electricity demand. Now, Kenya Power maintains that the country has enough electricity to support the growth of electric mobility. And this is at a time when the government has been trying to gradually cut the use of fossil fuels. Jasmine Wamboi, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Kenyan technology firms are increasingly targeting new markets beyond Africa. This as demand for artificial intelligence, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and digital infrastructure solutions continues to grow globally. Industry players say the expansion is expected to strengthen Kenya's position as a regional technology hub.
The ethical use of AI which government is putting in the policy is a very good thing. We all think that AI would probably replace some jobs and stuff, but in technology field we don't believe that. What we believe is that it will create so much new opportunities if it may take some few jobs, but the expansion on this thing, the new fields coming up, it will add in so many new lines and jobs.
Now, the national under-17 women team, the Junior Starlets, have completed their preparations for the second round of the World Cup qualifiers against Uganda in Kampala on Friday afternoon. The Starlets are confidence is sky high after a 7-1 aggregate win over Namibia in the first round. Uganda are also in a good space after hammering Zimbabwe 6-1 in the previous round. Kenya has the advantage of playing the first leg away from home before finishing at home a week later. The aggregate winner has an uphill task as Cameroon awaits in the third and final round of the qualifiers. Junior Starlets are looking for a second appearance at the World Cup after their maiden appearance 2 years ago. Africa has been allocated 4 slots at the Under-17 Women World Cup to be played in Morocco later this year.
The entire squad is fully fit, apart from one player who's unwell, Noella. We are observing her to see whether she'll be ready for tomorrow. If not, we'll have other players who are willing to step in and play for the team. Of course, we're expecting higher resistance because winning against a team twice is difficult, so they won't make it easy for us. But we've prepared our team mentally that it's going to be a tough match, so we have to fight till the very end for us to get a positive result.
The Kenya Karate Federation has put all plans in place as they prepare to host the UFEK Region East Karate Championship 2026 from May 28th to 31st at the Nyayo National Stadium Indoor Arena. Organized under the auspices of the Union of Africa Karate Federations, the championship is expected to draw elite karate athletes, coaches, referees, officials, and delegates from 14 countries across the East African region. Team Kenya of 50 athletes will enter competitions in all three, or competitors in all three categories: the juniors, the cadets, and the seniors. The selection was finalized on Saturday, and the team is now camping in Thika ahead of the championship. In the last regional event held in Ethiopia, Kenya scooped 10 gold medals. Senior officials from the Africa Karate Federation as well as the World Karate Federation will be in Kenya for the 3-day championship. Those who do well in Nairobi will be included in the Kenya team for the Africa Karate Championship to be held in Algeria in September.
We've expanded the sport. We also have para-athletes, but it will be a demo. Karate is for everyone. There are so many benefits that you can get from karate. Apart from sport, it can be recreation. It can be for fitness.
Now, the Nairobi City Marathon 2026 edition will be much bigger than previous years after attracting a massive 17,000 runners, a 6% increase in attendance from the 2025 edition. Most of the runners registered for the 10-kilometer run. The marathon has attracted participants from 75 countries.
Day by day, we see the number of athletes increasing and the participants. And even when they announce that they have closed, a lot of people are calling us, how can we go in? Can we just run with our vests? We don't need the bibs, we don't need the t-shirts. But then again, the safety and the quality of the marathon has to be maintained.
Our theme captures it perfectly. Feel the pulse of Nairobi. Because that is exactly what this marathon is all about. It's the heartbeat of our city. Nairobi is vibrant, dynamic, ambitious, and unstoppable. And so is our marathon.
Today we are equally proud that Kenya is also building some of the finest marathon events on the African continent. The Nairobi City Marathon has rapidly grown into a signature event of our capital city and for the nation. The increasing participation numbers and international interest demonstrates the confidence athletes and fans have in this event.
And the 2026 Rhino Charge Off-Road Challenge got a major boost today with an injection of 116 million shillings from two corporates in support of the Off-Road Challenge. 114 million shillings was received from the M-Pesa Foundation and Safaricom PLC, while Kenya Breweries Limited put in an additional 2.3 million shillings sponsorship towards the 37th edition of the Rhino Charge. The 2026 Rhino Charge set to take place in Samburu County from May 29th to 31st, bringing together competitors, conservationists, sponsors, and adventure enthusiasts for one of Kenya's most iconic conservation fundraising events. The event, organized by the Rhino Ark Charitable Trust, has raised more than 2.7 billion shillings since its inception in 1989 to support the protection of Kenya's critical ecosystems and water towers, including the Aberdare Range, Mount Kenya, the Mau Forest Complex, and Kakamega Forest. Part of the sponsorship money will support number 44, which will receive 14 million, while the EV Explorers and Zambarao Hills on the Wheels teams will each receive 1 million shillings to support their participation in the challenge. And finally, Arsenal fans in Kenya have every reason to smile after plans were announced for multiple watch parties across the country for the UEFA Championships or Champions League finals. There will be viewing locations in 4 major cities: Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and Eldoret.
Number one biggest one is all football fans are friends. Regardless of which team they support, the banter is amazing, but it always comes from a place of we are all football lovers, we are all fans of different games, but we do have a friendship aspect of it. I think we've seen even in terms of the launch, the conversations that go on, it's really from a point of friendship.
Yeah, I think Jamila is working on that in readiness for that important occasion. But we are taking a short break. When we come back, remember the Member of Parliament for Kiharu, Dindi Nyoro, is still in studio. We'll be talking about matters of fuel situation in the country, what he knows, what we should do, and of course, the state of the economy. Do stay tuned for that. One-on-one.